had been living in the house for months after Bradley's death, trying to heal from the loss. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. Bradley's laughter, once so lively, now echoed only in my memories. It was a Tuesday evening when I heard the knock at the door, sharp and insistent. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected anyone, and the sudden interruption made the air in the house feel thick with unease. I wasn't sure what I expected to find when I opened the door, but it certainly wasn't Marcus and Rita standing there, looking as though they had been waiting for this moment. My mother-in-law's eyes were shadowed with something I couldn't quite place, and Marcus, her son, seemed unusually tense. "We need to talk," Rita said, her voice unnaturally calm, though I could see the anxiety simmering beneath the surface. I barely had time to respond before Marcus stepped forward, his eyes narrowed with a mix of determination and desperation. "It's about the will," he said, his voice low but sharp. That was all he needed to say for me to understand. They were here for something more than just a conversation. They came in without waiting for an invitation, their presence in the house like an unspoken tension hanging in the air. I gestured for them to sit, my mind racing. What could they possibly want? I had already gone through the will Bradley left me after his death. It was straightforward, leaving everything to me, his beloved wife. But as I watched them, something told me they weren't here to discuss that. Rita's hands trembled slightly as she placed a thick envelope on the coffee table. I stared at it, an unsettling feeling creeping up my spine. "We've come to talk about the will," Marcus repeated, his voice carrying a strange urgency. Rita glanced at him, almost as if waiting for him to say more. But he fell silent. I hesitated, reaching for the envelope slowly. As my fingers brushed against the paper, I felt a chill, as though something was wrong. I opened it, unfolding the contents with careful precision. There it was, a new will, Bradley's signature, but dated only a week before his death. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't the will Bradley had left me. This was a new version, one that left everything to Rita and Marcus. I couldn't believe it. Had Bradley been coerced? Was this their doing? The world seemed to slow as I stared at the new will in my hands. My thoughts raced. How could Bradley, a man who had always been kind, generous, and thoughtful, have left everything to Rita and Marcus? The more I looked at it, the more I realized something was off. The signature seemed shaky, not like Bradley at all. And the date, just days before his passing, was troubling. I had known Bradley for over 15 years, and I couldn't imagine him changing his will in such a way, especially not under these circumstances. Something wasn't right. I stood up suddenly, my heart pounding. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. "It's Bradley's will. He changed it shortly before he passed. He wanted us to have everything," he said, but the words sounded hollow, rehearsed. I turned to Rita, hoping for a different response, but her face was grim, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of guilt and defiance. "Bradley wanted this," she said firmly, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Something was wrong, and I needed to find out what. I couldn't shake the unease that settled deep in my chest. This new will felt like a lie, a manipulation. I had to know the truth. I needed to find out what had really happened in those final days of Bradley's life. Without saying a word, I excused myself and left the room, heading straight for the study. It was Bradley's space, where he kept all his important documents, the place where I had found the first will, the one that left everything to me. I rifled through the drawers, the familiar scent of old paper filling the air. As I dug deeper, my hands trembling, I found something that made my heart race, a recording device. It was small, inconspicuous, but the red light on it indicated that it had been used recently. My breath caught in my throat. Could this be the evidence I needed? I quickly played the recording, my hands shaking. The voice that filled the room was Bradley's, but he sounded weak, exhausted. I'm signing it because I have no choice, he whispered. Hazel, please forgive me. The recording ended abruptly. I was frozen, the weight of what I had just heard crashing over me. Bradley had been coerced. He hadn't signed that will willingly. I couldn't hold back the rush of emotions as I walked back into the living room. I held the recording device in my hand, my grip tight, and my voice filled with a mix of fury and heartbreak. You did this to him, I said, my words sharp. Rita and Marcus stood up immediately, their faces pale. What is that? Marcus asked, his eyes wide with fear. I pressed the button, playing the recording out loud for them to hear. Bradley's voice, so fragile and filled with regret, filled the room. You heard him, I said quietly, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and sorrow. He didn't do this willingly. You forced him. Rita's face contorted with guilt, and Marcus took a step back, his eyes darting between me and the recording. You're twisting this, Rita said, her voice defensive but shaky. We only wanted to make sure Bradley's wishes were respected. Respect? I repeated, my voice rising. This isn't respect. This is manipulation. You took advantage of him at his weakest moment. The room seemed to grow colder, the tension thickening like a storm cloud ready to break. Marcus and Rita began to argue back, but their words were meaningless to me. I knew what had happened, and no amount of denial could change that. Bradley told me everything, I said, my voice firm. He told me you forced him to sign that will. He told me you threatened him, used his illness against him to get what you wanted. Rita's face flushed with anger. You don't understand, she spat. Bradley was dying. We had to make sure the right people were taken care of. You wouldn't understand. You weren't there. Her words stung, but I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into sympathy. I was there, I said coldly. I was the one who stayed by his side, day and night, watching him suffer while you were nowhere to be found. And now you want to take everything he worked for? You don't deserve any of it. Marcus clenched his fists. You don't know what you're talking about, he growled, but his voice lacked conviction. Bradley would have wanted us to have it. You're just trying to take it all for yourself. The accusation hung in the air, but I refused to be drawn into it. The truth was clear, and I wasn't going to back down. I knew this battle wasn't over, and I needed more proof. I wasn't about to let Rita and Marcus get away with what they had done. I needed to know exactly what had happened in those final days at the hospital. The next day, I went to the hospital where Bradley had been treated. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I had a feeling that something in the records would give me the final piece of the puzzle. After some persuasion, I was granted access to the surveillance footage from the hospital. My heart raced as I sat in front of the screen, watching the grainy footage of the hospital room where Bradley had spent his final days. The image was clear enough for me to see Rita and Marcus entering the room. The footage showed them sitting by Bradley's bedside, talking in low voices. They were smiling, their expressions too pleased for people who should have been grieving. As the footage continued, I saw the moment when they pressured Bradley to sign the will. Rita was standing over him, and Marcus was holding the pen in front of his trembling hand. Bradley's face was pale, his body weak, but it was the look in his eyes that broke my heart. He was scared. He was being forced. The footage was undeniable. I had what I needed now. Bradley's last days had been filled with fear, manipulated by the very people he should have been able to trust the most. I returned home, determined to confront them once and for all. I called Rita and Marcus to meet me at the house, but this time, I wasn't going to play their game. When they arrived, they could see the change in my demeanor. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. I sat them down and played the footage from the hospital on the TV screen. As they watched, their faces twisted with panic. You think this will stop me? Marcus said, his voice trembling but defiant. You're nothing but a meddler, Hazel. This will never hold up in court. But the fear in his eyes told a different story. They knew they were done. The truth had been exposed, and no matter how hard they tried to deny it, The evidence was irrefutable. I stood up and looked at them, my voice steady. You can try to deny it all you want, but the truth is out. Bradley was coerced, and now I will make sure he gets the justice he deserves. The legal battle began shortly after the confrontation. I filed charges against Rita and Marcus for elder abuse and forgery. The courts moved quickly, and soon enough, the hearings were underway. Rita and Marcus tried to defend themselves, but their stories didn't hold up under scrutiny. The footage from the hospital, along with the recording of Bradley's voice, made it clear that they had manipulated him in his final days. The emotional toll was immense, but I stayed strong. I knew I was fighting for Bradley's memory, for his dignity. Days turned into weeks, and the trial dragged on, but I never wavered. I had the truth on my side. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Rita and Marcus were ordered to pay restitution and face charges for their actions. But it wasn't about the money for me. It was about ensuring that Bradley's legacy wasn't tainted by their greed. The aftermath of the trial was quieter than I had expected. Rita and Marcus went their separate ways, humiliated and broken. The house, once filled with their lies and manipulation, was finally at peace. But even though I had won, it didn't feel like a victory. I had fought to honor Bradley's memory, but I couldn't bring him back. He was gone, and no amount of justice could change that. I spent the next few months in solitude, trying to heal, to move forward. There were days when I could feel his presence in the house, as if he were still there, watching over me, and other days when the silence felt deafening. But I knew one thing for certain. I had honored his last wishes, and that was all I could do. Over time, I began to heal. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt lost without Bradley. But slowly, I started to rebuild my life. The house that once felt so empty began to feel like home again. I redecorated, filled the rooms with light and warmth. It wasn't the same without Bradley, but it was mine. I had taken back control, and for the first time in months, I began to find peace. I would never forget what happened, the lies, the manipulation, but I had learned something valuable, that the truth always comes to light. No matter how hard they tried to hide it, I had exposed their treachery. And for that, I could finally let go. As the years passed, I found myself moving forward. The memories of Bradley's death and the battle over his estate faded, replaced by new experiences and relationships. I traveled, met new people, and rebuilt my life in a way I never thought possible. But Bradley's memory never left me. I carried him in my heart, and every day I honored the lessons he taught me. To be strong, to stand up for what's right, and to never let anyone take away what I deserved. The past was behind me now, and the future was mine to create. With each passing day, I moved closer to the life I had always wanted, free from the shadows of the past, and as I looked forward, I knew one thing for sure. No one would ever take away my peace again.